I found a bottle of massage oil hidden in my husband's gym bag, and what I did next turned our quiet suburban neighborhood into the scene of the most embarrassing police call of the year. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I want to see how far this story of revenge travels. The silence in our house had become suffocating. For 3 months, Marcus had been coming home later and later, always with the same excuse: extended training sessions with my new personal training client. His gym clothes reeked of expensive perfume that definitely wasn't the industrial-strength deodorant he usually wore, but it was the way he'd started showering immediately when he got home that first made my stomach clench with suspicion. I'm Sarah, and I've been married to Marcus for 12 years. We met at a fitness expo where I was running a booth for my nutrition consulting business. He was this charming personal trainer with infectious energy and arms that could make any woman forget her own name. Back then, he couldn't keep his hands off me. Now, he barely looked up from his phone during dinner. Last Tuesday night, everything changed. Marcus stumbled through the front door at nearly midnight, his gym bag slung over his shoulder with unusual care. "Sorry, babe, had to stay late with Chelsea," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "She's training for a marathon and needed extra work on her flexibility." The way he said flexibility made my skin crawl. I watched him disappear into our bedroom, heard the shower start, and something primitive inside me snapped. While the water ran, I quietly unzipped his gym bag. The smell hit me first: jasmine and vanilla, sweet and cloying, nothing like the antiseptic scent of the gym. My hands shook as I pushed aside his workout clothes, protein shaker, and towel. That's when I found it. Hidden beneath his spare sneakers was a bottle of massage oil. Not just any massage oil, but an expensive organic blend with a handwritten label for our special sessions. See, the bottle was nearly empty, the cap sticky with residue. I stood there in our bedroom, holding this evidence of betrayal, while my husband of 12 years hummed in the shower like he didn't have a care in the world. But this wasn't the worst part, not even close. I unscrewed the cap and caught a whiff of the contents. It wasn't just massage oil. There was something else mixed in, something that made my cheeks burn with humiliation. I quickly screwed the cap back on and placed the bottle exactly where I'd found it, my hands trembling so violently I almost dropped it. The next morning, Marcus kissed my forehead like he had every morning for 12 years. "I've got back-to-back sessions today," he said, grabbing his coffee, including another late one with Chelsea. "She's really making progress." I nodded and smiled, playing the role of the trusting wife. But inside, a plan was already forming. As soon as Marcus left, I called my sister Emma. She's a private investigator who specializes in domestic cases, and she'd been warning me about Marcus's behavior for weeks. "Sarah, I hate to say this, but I think it's time we got some proof." 2 hours later, Emma was parked across from Elite Fitness, the high-end gym where Marcus worked. She had her camera ready and strict instructions: document everything. I stayed home, pacing our kitchen, alternating between hope that I was wrong and certainty that I wasn't. At 3:47 p.m., my phone buzzed, a text from Emma with a single photo attachment. My heart stopped. Marcus was in the gym's parking lot, but he wasn't alone. He was pressed against a red convertible, locked in an embrace with a stunning blonde woman in workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her hands were tangled in his hair, his arms wrapped around her waist like she was the most precious thing in the world. The moment I saw the photo, it felt like the ground disappeared under my feet. My chest ached like I couldn't breathe. Have you ever had that instant where your worst fear becomes real? I zoomed in on her face, though I already knew who it was: Chelsea Martinez, the local news anchor who'd joined the gym 6 months ago. I'd seen her picture in the society pages, always at charity galas, with her wealthy businessman husband, Robert. She was everything I wasn't: tall, blonde, perfectly sculpted, and apparently very flexible. But Emma wasn't done. 3 more photos followed in quick succession. Marcus opening the passenger door of Chelsea's convertible, Marcus getting in, Marcus and Chelsea driving away together at 4:15 p.m., when he was supposed to be working until 8. My phone rang immediately. "Sarah," I followed them. Emma's voice was tight with anger. "They went to the Grandview Hotel, room 237. They've been in there for 2 hours." I sank into our kitchen chair, the same chair where I'd eaten breakfast with Marcus that morning, where he'd kissed me goodbye and lied directly to my face. The Grandview Hotel, the place where we'd spent our 5th wedding anniversary, where he'd told me I was the only woman he'd ever loved. There's more, Emma continued. I did some digging. Chelsea's been having problems with her husband Robert. Word is, he found out about some financial improprieties at her news station. She's looking at a possible divorce, and if Robert's smart, he'll take her for everything she's worth. That night I sat in our living room, waiting. Marcus came home at 11:30 p.m., later than ever before. His explanation was elaborate. Chelsea had a panic attack during her workout. I had to stay and help her through it. We went for coffee to talk about her anxiety. You know how these wealthy clients can be. They pay for emotional support too. The lies rolled off his tongue so smoothly it was almost impressive. He'd had months to perfect his story, to craft the perfect deception, but he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. The next morning, I drove to the craft store and purchased 5 tubes of industrial-strength superglue, the kind they use for metal and glass. Clear, odorless, and designed to bond permanently within seconds of contact with skin. I tampered with the bottle until it looked and smelled exactly the same. Marcus would never notice, but when he used it, everything would change. The bottle looked identical. Same weight, same consistency when shaken gently, same aromatic vanilla jasmine fragrance. Perfect. But I wasn't done. If Marcus and Chelsea wanted to play games, I was going to change the rules entirely. I called Emma again. I need you to keep watching them. Document everything. And when they go to their next session, I want you to call the police. Sarah, what are you planning? Justice, I said simply. Thursday evening arrived with the usual routine. Marcus's elaborate explanation about Chelsea's emergency training session, his guilty kiss goodbye, his careful handling of that gym bag. I watched him leave, then immediately texted Emma. He's on his way. Asterisk at 6:45 p.m. Emma confirmed. They're at the hotel. Same room. I can see them through the window. They're getting comfortable. I took a deep breath. Give them exactly 30 minutes. Then make the call. What happened next exceeded my wildest expectations. At exactly 7:15 p.m., Emma called 911. I need to report a disturbance at the Grandview Hotel, room 237. I can hear screaming and it sounds like someone might be hurt. The police arrived in 4 minutes. Emma was waiting in the lobby with her private investigator credentials and a concerned expression. Officers, I was conducting surveillance on an insurance fraud case when I heard the screaming start. It's been going on for 10 minutes now. It sounds like someone might be trapped. 3 officers, including Sergeant Williams who'd been on the force for 20 years, took the elevator to the 2nd floor. The screaming from room 237 was audible from the hallway. What they found when they used the master key will be talked about in this town for decades. Marcus and Chelsea were stuck together, literally stuck. The massage oil had done its job perfectly, bonding their skin at every point of contact. Chelsea was sobbing hysterically, her manicured nails clawing at Marcus's back as she tried to separate herself from him. Marcus was cursing a blue streak, his face purple with rage and humiliation. I watched from the car, my heart racing. It wasn't joy I felt. Not really, it was relief. For once, the truth wasn't mine alone to carry. Everyone could finally see what I had known for months. What the hell is happening here? Sergeant Williams demanded. We can't get apart. Chelsea shrieked. Something's wrong with the oil. We're stuck. The officers stared in disbelief. In 20 years of police work, Sergeant Williams had seen domestic disputes, drug busts, and robbery calls. But he'd never seen anything like this. 2 adults, both married to other people, trapped in the most compromising position imaginable by what appeared to be industrial adhesive. We need the fire department. Officer Martinez radioed, and paramedics. We've got a unique situation here. Within minutes, the Grandview Hotel was swarming with emergency responders. The fire department arrived with specialized tools for separating bonded materials. Paramedics brought medical-grade. Hotel management cordoned off the entire 2nd floor, trying desperately to contain the situation. But it was too late. By 8 p.m., news trucks were pulling into the parking lot. Chelsea Martinez, the polished news anchor who reported on other people's scandals, had become the biggest story in town. Emma, still playing the concerned witness, provided a detailed statement to police about what she'd observed. I've been investigating insurance fraud involving a local gym, she told them. This trainer, Marcus Thompson, has been conducting unauthorized private sessions and possibly committing adultery with multiple clients. I have extensive documentation. She handed over a folder thick with photographs. Marcus and Chelsea leaving the gym together, entering the hotel, embracing in the parking lot, time-stamped evidence of their affair spanning 3 months. Meanwhile, back in room 237, the fire department had to use special equipment to try and separate the two cheaters. The process was slow, painful, and absolutely humiliating. Every few minutes, Chelsea would break into fresh sobs, begging the responders to please not tell anyone about this. But the damage was already done. Hotel guests were recording videos through their windows. The story was spreading across social media faster than the emergency responders could work. By 9 p.m., #MassageOilRevenge was trending locally. Marcus, in between howls of pain as the firefighters worked to free him, kept demanding to know who had done this to them. "Someone sabotaged the oil," he screamed. "This is assault. I want them arrested." Sergeant Williams looked at him with disgust. "Sir, you're lucky we don't arrest you for public indecency. You and this woman are both married to other people. You're trespassing in a hotel room, and from what I can see, you've been conducting an extramarital affair. I suggest you focus on explaining this to your spouses, instead of looking for someone to blame." It took 3 hours to separate them completely. 3 hours of pain, humiliation, and public exposure that would follow them for the rest of their lives. It took hours before firefighters and medics managed to pull them apart. They left covered in bandages and in humiliation. By the time they were loaded into separate ambulances, the story had gone viral. Local news stations were running coverage. Social media was exploding with memes and jokes, and everyone in our small town knew exactly what had happened. I watched it all from Emma's car in the hotel parking lot, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of satisfaction. 12 years of marriage, of trust, of believing in someone who'd been lying to me for months. The humiliation I'd felt discovering that massage oil was nothing compared to what Marcus and Chelsea were experiencing now. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Robert Martinez, Chelsea's husband. I think we need to talk." We met the next morning at a small cafe downtown, far from the media circus still surrounding the hotel. Robert was a distinguished man in his 50s, with silver hair and tired eyes that spoke of his own recent discoveries. "I've known about Chelsea's affairs for 6 months, he said quietly, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "This isn't her first, but it's definitely her last." He slid a manila envelope across the table. "My attorney prepared these divorce papers with a clause about infidelity that will cost her everything. Her job, her reputation, and half of everything we've built together." I opened the envelope and found a second set of papers underneath. "These are for you," Robert said. "Divorce papers for Marcus, with documentation of his adultery and breach of his personal training ethics. My lawyer says you can take him for spousal support, half of his business, and possibly sue for emotional distress." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who'd been betrayed by the people they'd trusted most. Then Robert smiled for the first time since I'd met him. "You know, I have to admire your creativity," he said. "I've been planning my revenge for months, trying to figure out how to expose Chelsea's affairs without destroying my own reputation. You solved both our problems in one night." That afternoon, I drove home to find Marcus sitting at our kitchen table, his arms and torso covered in bandages from the adhesive removal. He looked up at me with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Sarah, I can explain everything." I set the divorce papers on the table in front of him. "No need. I already know everything." His face went white as he saw the photographs Emma had taken, the timeline of his deception, the evidence of his affair with Chelsea and who knows how many other clients. "You did this," he whispered. "You swapped the oil." I sat down across from him, in the same chair where I'd eaten breakfast and listened to his lies for months. "I did what you forced me to do. I protected myself. Sarah, please, it was just physical. It didn't mean anything. Marcus, you've been lying to me for months. You've been using our home, our bed, our marriage as a cover story while you played house with your girlfriend. You weren't just cheating on me. You were making me complicit in your deception." He tried to reach across the table for my hand, but the bandages made him wince. "We can work through this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want." I stood up. "The only thing I want is for you to sign those papers and be out of this house by tomorrow." The next week was a blur of media attention, legal consultations, and therapy sessions. Emma moved in temporarily to help me navigate the circus that my life had become. The story had spread far beyond our small town, picked up by national news outlets as the massage oil revenge case. I received hundreds of messages from women sharing their own stories of betrayal and revenge. Support groups reached out, offering resources for betrayed spouses. 3 different publishers contacted me about writing a book about the experience, but the most satisfying moment came 2 weeks later, when I was grocery shopping and ran into Mrs. Henderson from down the street. "Sarah, dear, I just wanted you to know how proud I am of you," she said, squeezing my arm. "That husband of yours got exactly what he deserved. And that news anchor, the nerve of her, preaching about family values on television, while carrying on like that." I smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'm just focused on moving forward now. Good for you. And if you ever need anything, you just let me know. The whole neighborhood is behind you." As I drove home with my groceries, I reflected on everything that had happened. Marcus was living in a studio apartment across town, his personal training business ruined by the scandal. Chelsea had been fired from the news station and was facing her own messy divorce. Their affair, which they thought was so secret and clever, had cost them everything. I pulled into my driveway and looked at the house that was now truly mine. Tomorrow, I was meeting with a business partner about expanding my nutrition consulting practice. Next month, I was starting graduate school to get my master's degree in counseling. For the first time in months, I was excited about my future. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life, you vindictive bitch. I hope you're happy." I recognized the tone, if not the number. Marcus had gotten a burner phone to harass me. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to my attorney, then blocked the number. Then I typed a response he'd never see. "I didn't destroy your life, Marcus. You did that all by yourself. I just made sure everyone could see what you really were." That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and Emma, planning my next chapter. The local news was running a follow-up story about the case, interviewing legal experts about adultery and revenge. "Do you regret it?" Emma asked. The way everything played out, I thought about it carefully. The public humiliation, the media circus, the permanent damage to multiple lives. Then I thought about those months of lies, of being made to feel like I was crazy for suspecting what I knew in my heart to be true. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Marcus chose to betray our marriage instead of talking to me if he was unhappy. I regret that Chelsea chose to pursue a married man instead of dealing with her own marriage problems honestly. But I don't regret exposing the truth." Emma nodded. "Good. You deserve better than what they put you through." 3 months later, I was featured in a national magazine article about women who'd taken creative revenge on cheating spouses. The reporter asked me what advice I'd give to other women in similar situations. "Document everything," I said. "Trust your instincts. And remember that the truth always comes out eventually. You can either be proactive about revealing it, or wait for it to destroy you along with everyone else." The article ran with the headline, "When Trust Dies, Truth Lives: One Woman's Journey from Betrayal to Empowerment." I framed a copy and hung it in my new office, where I now counsel other women dealing with infidelity and divorce. Every day, I help someone navigate the aftermath of betrayal, offering them the support and validation I wished I'd had during those dark months of suspicion and discovery. Marcus tried to contact me one more time, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. He'd moved to another state, changed his name, and was working at a big box store instead of training clients. The scandal had followed him everywhere in the fitness industry. "Sarah, I've been thinking about everything that happened," he said when I answered his call. "I want you to know that I understand now how much I hurt you. I was selfish and stupid, and I'm sorry." I listened to his apology without interruption. When he finished, I said simply, "Thank you for saying that, Marcus. I hope you've learned something from this experience. I hope you never put another woman through what you put me through." "I won't," he said. "I promise." "Good. Take care of yourself." I hung up and deleted his new number from my phone. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had no intention of reopening it. Today, 2 years later, I run a successful counseling practice specializing in betrayal trauma. I speak at conferences about infidelity, recovery, and empowerment. I've written a book about my experience that's helped thousands of women navigate their own journeys from betrayal to healing. And sometimes, late at night when I'm home alone in the house that's truly mine now, I smile when I think about that bottle of massage oil, $5 worth of super glue that revealed the truth and changed everything. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply people try to bury it. Sometimes it emerges slowly, through careful investigation and patient documentation. Sometimes it explodes into the light through dramatic revelation. And sometimes, it gets people stuck together in a hotel room, while the fire department has to use industrial solvents to pull them apart. I've learned that revenge, when it's really justice in disguise, has a way of teaching everyone involved exactly what they need to know about themselves. Marcus learned that actions have consequences. Chelsea learned that other people's marriages aren't playgrounds for her entertainment. And I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, capable of protecting myself, even when the person who promised to protect me became the person I needed protection from. The massage oil is gone now, replaced by the self-respect I never should have lost. And that, I've discovered, is a much better foundation for building a life than any relationship based on lies ever could be. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. Some end with quiet acceptance and moving on. This story ended with superglue, fire trucks, and a truth so powerful it couldn't be hidden any longer, and I wouldn't change a single sticky, humiliating, justice-serving moment of it. If you liked my story, please let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. Your support means everything to me, and sharing these stories helps other women know they're not alone in their struggles. Subscribe for more stories of survival, strength, and sometimes very creative justice. Remember, the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Sometimes it just needs a little help rising to the surface. But my story doesn't end there. What happened next would prove that revenge, even justified revenge, creates waves that spread far beyond the original targets. 3 weeks after the hotel incident, I was contacted by Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Division. Apparently, the investigation into Marcus and Chelsea had uncovered something much bigger than a simple affair. Mrs. Thompson, Detective Morrison said when we met at the police station, we need to discuss what we found in your husband's business records during our investigation. She spread a series of documents across the table between us, bank statements, client files, payment records, all bearing Marcus's signature and business stamp from Elite Fitness. Your husband wasn't just having an affair with Chelsea Martinez, the detective explained. He was running an elaborate insurance fraud scheme with several of his wealthy female clients. My heart sank as she walked me through the evidence. Marcus had been convincing his clients to file false injury claims after their training sessions, then splitting the insurance payouts with them. Chelsea wasn't just his lover, she was his partner in crime, using her media connections to find new marks among the wealthy women who watched her morning show. The massage oil incident actually did us a huge favor, Detective Morrison continued. When we searched the hotel room, we found Chelsea's purse containing detailed records of their fraud network. Apparently, she kept everything on her phone as insurance against Marcus. I stared at the evidence, feeling sick. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate, close to $2 million over the past 3 years. $2 million, while I'd been faithfully managing our household budget, clipping coupons and worrying about our mortgage payments. Marcus had been stealing millions through fake insurance claims. There's more, Detective Morrison said gently. We found evidence that Marcus has been drugging some of his clients during their sessions. Nothing life-threatening, just mild sedatives to make them more compliant during the fraud consultations. The room spun around me. Are you saying he's been drugging women? We found Rohypnol residue in several water bottles in his gym locker. We're testing other clients now. But it appears he's been using drugs to make wealthy women more susceptible to his fraud schemes. I thought about all the times Marcus had come home talking about his difficult clients, the women who needed extra convincing to trust his training methods. Had he been drugging them this entire time? Mrs. Thompson, I need to ask, did Marcus ever give you anything to drink during arguments? Anything that made you feel unusually tired or compliant? The question hit me like a physical blow. I remembered several occasions over the past year when Marcus had brought me tea or wine during our discussions about his late nights and suspicious behavior. Times when I'd started to confront him but then felt suddenly exhausted, agreeing to drop the subject and go to bed. Oh my God, I whispered. He was drugging me too. Detective Morrison nodded grimly. We're going to need you to come in for some tests. We also need to know if you have any memory gaps or periods where you felt unusually confused or compliant around your husband. The next few hours were a blur of medical tests, detailed questioning, and the horrifying realization that my marriage had been built on layers of deception I'd never imagined. The affair was just the tip of the iceberg. Dr. Sarah Chen, the physician who examined me, confirmed what I already suspected. Mrs. Thompson, your blood work shows trace amounts of benzodiazepines, drugs commonly used to induce compliance and memory loss. Based on your account, your husband has been systematically drugging you for at least 6 months, possibly longer. I sat in the hospital exam room, trying to process this information. Marcus hadn't just been cheating on me, he'd been chemically controlling me, making me doubt my own instincts and memories. The good news, Dr. Chen continued, is that the drugs are out of your system now, and there shouldn't be any long-term effects. But I want you to understand how serious this is. Your husband was essentially holding you prisoner in your own mind. When I returned home that evening, the house felt different. Every room held new questions. How many times had Marcus drugged my coffee? How many conversations had I forgotten because of his chemical manipulation? How many times had I started to leave him, only to wake up the next morning feeling inexplicably willing to give him another chance? Emma found me sitting on the kitchen floor, crying. Sarah, what happened? The detective called me, but she wouldn't give me details. I told her everything. The fraud scheme, the drugging, the realization that my entire marriage had been a lie within a lie within a lie. Emma held me while I sobbed, both of us understanding that the massage oil revenge had uncovered something far darker than a simple affair. This explains so much, Emma said finally. Remember last year when you called me, convinced Marcus was cheating, and then the next day you acted like nothing had happened. You said you'd been overreacting and everything was fine. I did remember, or rather, I remembered the feeling of certainty followed by inexplicable doubt. He drugged me that night, didn't he? I think so, and probably dozens of other times when you got too close to the truth. The legal ramifications were staggering. Within a week, Marcus was arrested on charges of insurance fraud, conspiracy, drugging victims without consent, and spousal abuse. Chelsea was arrested as an accomplice. Her journalism career officially over, along with her marriage. But the story got even stranger when the police investigation expanded to other victims. Detective Morrison called me 2 weeks later with an update that left me speechless. Mrs. Thompson, we've identified 17 other women who were victims of your husband's fraud scheme. But here's the thing, 12 of them don't remember agreeing to file false insurance claims. He drugged them all. It appears so. We think Marcus would drug his female clients during their sessions, then convince them to file fraudulent injury claims while they were in a compliant state. Most of them have no memory of the conversations where they supposedly agreed to the fraud. I felt sick thinking about those women, successful professionals, and wealthy socialites who trusted Marcus with their fitness goals, only to be drugged and manipulated into criminal activity they didn't even remember. There's something else, Detective Morrison continued. Several of these women have come forward with additional allegations: sexual assault, financial theft, and in 2 cases, blackmail involving compromising photos taken while they were unconscious. The man I'd been married to for 12 years wasn't just a cheating husband or even a financial criminal. He was a predator who'd been systematically victimizing vulnerable women for years. The trial began 6 months later. I sat in the courtroom every day, watching witness after witness describe their experiences with Marcus, wealthy women who'd trusted him with their health and security, only to discover they'd been drugged, photographed, and defrauded. The most heartbreaking testimony came from Patricia Whitman, a 45-year-old surgeon who'd hired Marcus for post-divorce fitness training. I started working with Marcus after my divorce, she testified, her voice shaking. I was vulnerable, lonely, and he seemed so understanding. He convinced me to let him train me at my home gym for privacy. She described sessions where Marcus would bring her protein shakes that made her feel relaxed and trusting. She'd wake up hours later with no memory of their conversations, but with strange soreness and the feeling that something was wrong. I found photos on my phone that I didn't remember taking, she continued, compromising photos of myself that I would never have agreed to. When I confronted Marcus, he said I'd wanted to document my fitness progress and had asked him to take the pictures. The prosecutor displayed bank records showing that Patricia had transferred $50,000 to Marcus over 3 months, payments she had no memory of making. The defendant used a combination of pharmaceutical manipulation and psychological coercion to steal from Ms. Whitman, while convincing her that she was a willing participant. The prosecutor explained to the jury, "This is a pattern we see with all 17 victims." I watched Marcus during these testimonies, looking for any sign of remorse or recognition of the pain he'd caused. Instead, he sat stone-faced, occasionally whispering to his lawyer or shaking his head as if the victims were lying. The most damaging evidence came from Chelsea's phone, which had been recovered from the hotel room during the massage oil incident. She'd kept detailed records of their criminal enterprise, including videos of Marcus drugging victims and audio recordings of their conversations while the women were unconscious. In one particularly damning recording, Marcus could be heard telling an unconscious client, "You're going to file an insurance claim tomorrow for a shoulder injury. You'll say it happened during our session, and you'll remember feeling severe pain. When you wake up, this will feel like your idea." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Marcus was convicted on all counts. 17 counts of fraud, 12 counts of drugging victims without consent, 8 counts of sexual assault, 3 counts of blackmail, and 1 count of spousal abuse. The judge sentenced him to 35 years in prison. Chelsea received 15 years for her role as an accomplice, her career and reputation destroyed beyond repair. But the most shocking revelation came during the sentencing phase, when Marcus's defense attorney made a desperate attempt to reduce his sentence by revealing information about other crimes. "Convincing, Your Honor," the attorney said. "My client has information about a larger criminal network involving other personal trainers and fitness professionals. He's willing to cooperate with law enforcement in exchange for a reduced sentence." Detective Morrison later told me that Marcus's cooperation had led to the discovery of a multi-state network of fitness professionals who were drugging and defrauding wealthy female clients. The investigation eventually uncovered over $50 million in fraudulent insurance claims and hundreds of victims across 12 states. "Your massage oil stunt didn't just expose one affair," Detective Morrison explained. "It unraveled one of the largest fitness industry fraud schemes in American history. I tried to process this information. My simple act of revenge had accidentally triggered the exposure of a massive criminal enterprise that had been operating for years." The civil lawsuits began almost immediately. As Marcus's wife, I was initially named as a co-defendant in several cases, with victims' attorneys arguing that I must have known about his criminal activities. My attorney, Sarah Chen, no relation to my doctor, fought these accusations vigorously. My client was herself a victim. She argued in court. She was systematically drugged and manipulated by her husband, just like the other victims. The difference is that she lived with her abuser and couldn't escape his influence. The turning point came when Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a forensic psychologist, testified about the long-term effects of coercive control and chemical manipulation in domestic relationships. Mrs. Thompson was subjected to a sophisticated form of psychological and chemical abuse. Dr. Martinez explained to the court, her husband used drugs to suppress her ability to think clearly about his behavior, then used her compliance as evidence that she supported his activities. She presented brain scans showing the neurological impact of prolonged benzodiazepine exposure, explaining how the drugs had literally altered my brain chemistry to make me more susceptible to Marcus's manipulation. When someone is repeatedly drugged over months or years, their natural instincts and judgment become severely compromised. Dr. Martinez continued, Mrs. Thompson's decision to investigate her husband's affair actually represents her brain beginning to recover from chemical suppression. The civil cases against me were eventually dropped, and I received a settlement from Marcus's business insurance that helped cover my medical expenses and therapy costs. But money couldn't heal the psychological damage of discovering that my entire adult life had been built on lies, drugs, and criminal activity. The therapy sessions with Dr. Patricia Nguyen became a crucial part of my recovery. Unlike the couples counseling Marcus had suggested to manipulate me further, this was individual therapy focused on helping me understand and process what had really happened to me. Survivors of coercive control often blame themselves. Dr. Nguyen explained during one of our sessions, they think they should have known, should have seen the signs, should have been stronger. I was struggling with exactly those feelings. How could I live with someone for 12 years and not know he was a criminal? How could I let him drug me without realizing it? Sarah, you need to understand that Marcus was a professional manipulator. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. It was a carefully planned, systematic operation designed to exploit vulnerable people. You weren't stupid or weak. You were targeted by someone who'd perfected these techniques on dozens of other victims. She helped me understand that the very qualities that made me a good wife, trust, loyalty, the desire to see the best in people, were the same qualities Marcus had exploited to control me. The fact that you eventually trusted your instincts enough to investigate the affair shows incredible strength. Dr. Nguyen continued, your subconscious mind was fighting against the chemical suppression, trying to protect you. The recovery process was slow and painful. I had to relearn how to trust my own judgment, how to recognize the difference between my authentic thoughts and the chemically induced compliance I'd experienced for years. Some memories began returning as the drugs fully left my system. Conversations where I'd confronted Marcus about his behavior, only to mysteriously drop the subject after he brought me tea or wine. Times when I'd planned to leave, only to wake up feeling inexplicably certain that our marriage was worth saving. It's like waking up from a really long, confusing dream, I told Emma during one of our weekly coffee meetings. I keep having these moments where I remember my real thoughts and feelings, before the drugs suppressed them. Emma had been my anchor throughout the legal proceedings and recovery process. Do you remember that night 2 years ago when you called me at 2 a.m., absolutely convinced that Marcus was having an affair? You had this whole plan to hire a private investigator and document everything. I did remember that call, vaguely. What happened? The next morning you called back and said you'd been silly and overreacting. You said Marcus had explained everything and you felt foolish for doubting him. It was so unlike you that I almost drove over to check on you. He drugged me that night, I said with certainty. I was getting too close to the truth. So he shut down my ability to think clearly. The realization that I'd actually discovered his affair years earlier, only to have the knowledge chemically erased, was both validating and terrifying. How many times had I been on the verge of escaping, only to be pulled back into compliance? Dr. Wynne helped me understand that this was actually a common pattern in cases of coercive control. Abusers often escalate their manipulation tactics when victims start to break free. The drugging likely increased whenever you showed signs of independence or suspicion. As my head cleared, I began to see other patterns I'd missed. The way Marcus would insist on making my coffee in the morning, especially after arguments, his habit of bringing me wine when I was stressed about finances or suspicious about his behavior, the protein shakes he'd encourage me to drink after my own workouts, claiming they were specially formulated for my nutritional needs. I was living in my own home like a prisoner, I told Dr. Wynne during one session. Except I didn't even know the bars were there. The most disturbing realization came when I discovered journals I'd kept throughout my marriage. Reading my own words from years past was like communication from another person, someone who'd been systematically silenced by chemicals and manipulation. One entry from 3 years earlier read, "Something is wrong with Marcus. He's lying about where he goes, lying about money, lying about everything. I need to trust my instincts and investigate. Tomorrow, I'm going to follow him." The next entry, dated 2 days later, "I feel so silly about my suspicions. Marcus explained everything and I realize I was just being paranoid. I need to work on trusting my husband more. Maybe I should see a therapist about my anxiety." Reading these entries was heartbreaking. I could see my authentic self trying to surface, only to be chemically suppressed back into compliance. Dr. Wynne explained that this type of manipulation was particularly insidious because it targeted the victim's relationship with reality itself. Marcus wasn't just controlling your behavior, he was controlling your ability to perceive and remember your own experiences. The revenge had been my subconscious mind's final desperate attempt to expose the truth. Before I lost myself completely, even under chemical influence, some part of me had recognized the threat and fought back in the only way available. 1 year after Marcus's conviction, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Whitman, the surgeon who'd testified at his trial, knocked on my door on a quiet Sunday afternoon. "I hope you don't mind me coming by," she said nervously. "I got your address from Detective Morrison. I wanted to thank you." We sat in my living room, two women bound together by our shared victimization and survival. "If you hadn't exposed Marcus the way you did, he'd still be out there drugging women," Patricia said. "I would still think I was losing my mind, wondering why I couldn't remember making those financial decisions or taking those photos." She told me about her own recovery process, the slow realization that her memory gaps and financial losses hadn't been symptoms of stress or aging, but evidence of systematic abuse. "I've started a support group for Marcus's victims," she continued. "We meet twice a week to help each other process what happened to us. Would you consider joining us?" The support group became another crucial element of my healing. Sitting in a circle with 16 other women who'd been victimized by Marcus, I finally understood that I wasn't alone in my experience or my shame. Each woman's story was different but followed a similar pattern: trust, manipulation, chemical suppression, financial exploitation, and the gradual erosion of their ability to trust their own perceptions. Jennifer, a 38-year-old real estate agent, described waking up after training sessions with Marcus, feeling disoriented and finding large cash withdrawals on her bank statements she couldn't remember making. Linda, a retired teacher, told us about discovering nude photos of herself on her phone that she had no memory of taking, photos that Marcus later used to blackmail her into silence when she started asking questions about missing jewelry. Margaret, a wealthy widow, had transferred her entire life savings to Marcus over 6 months, convinced that she was investing in a legitimate fitness franchise. She had no memory of making the decision or signing the transfer documents. The hardest part, Margaret told the group, is accepting that it wasn't my fault. For months, I blamed myself for being stupid enough to give away my money. Now, I understand that I wasn't stupid, I was drugged. Our support group became a place where we could share our experiences without judgment, where our memories and perceptions were validated rather than questioned. Dr. Wynn facilitated our meetings, helping us understand the psychological tactics Marcus had used and developed strategies for rebuilding our sense of self. Survivors of this type of abuse often struggle with reality testing, she explained during one session. When someone has systematically altered your perception of reality, it takes time to learn to trust your own mind again. She taught us techniques for grounding ourselves in the present moment, for distinguishing between authentic thoughts and the residual effects of manipulation. Slowly, we began to reclaim our sense of agency and judgment. The group also became a source of practical support. Jennifer helped several women understand their legal options for recovering stolen money. Linda's background in education made her excellent at helping us research the long-term effects of benzodiazepine abuse. Margaret used her business connections to help some of the younger victims rebuild their professional reputations. We're not just survivors, Patricia said during one particularly emotional meeting. We're a family that Marcus accidentally created through his crimes. 2 years after the trial, I received a letter from Marcus in prison. Against my attorney's advice, I decided to read it. Sarah, the letter began, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to understand what really happened. I never meant for things to go as far as they did. It started small, just helping a few clients with legitimate insurance claims, and then it spiraled out of control. The letter continued for 3 pages, full of justifications and explanations that demonstrated no real understanding of what he'd done. He claimed the drugging was just to help his clients relax and focus during their sessions. He insisted that the sexual assault allegations were misunderstandings, and that all the women had been willing participants. Most disturbing was his treatment of our marriage. I always loved you, Sarah. The other women never meant anything to me. I was just giving my clients what they wanted while trying to build a better life for us. There was no acknowledgement that he drugged and controlled me, no recognition that I'd been a victim rather than a beneficiary of his crimes. Even facing 35 years in prison, Marcus couldn't accept responsibility for the scope of his actions. I showed the letter to Dr. Wynn during our next session. This is actually a perfect example of how manipulators think, she explained. Marcus still sees himself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of a criminal enterprise. He's trying to manipulate you even from prison, hoping to gain your sympathy or support for an appeal. I wrote back exactly once, Marcus, I am not the woman you married. That woman was chemically suppressed and psychologically controlled. I am someone you never met, the person I was meant to be before you started drugging me. That person will never forgive you, will never visit you, and will never support your appeals. Do not contact me again. He didn't. 3 years after the trial, something unexpected happened. I fell in love. Dr. James Morrison, no relation to Detective Morrison, was a forensic psychiatrist who'd consulted on Marcus's case. We met again at a conference where I was speaking about coercive control in domestic relationships. I remember you from the trial, he said after my presentation. Your testimony about recognizing the signs of chemical manipulation was incredibly powerful. How did you develop such insight into the psychological aspects of your experience? We talked for hours about trauma recovery, the long-term effects of psychological abuse, and the challenges of rebuilding identity after systematic manipulation. James had worked with hundreds of abuse survivors, but he'd never met someone who could articulate the experience of coercive control so clearly. You have a gift for helping people understand complex psychological concepts, he told me. Have you ever considered writing about your experience professionally? That conversation led to my second book, Chemical Chains: Understanding Coercive Control in the Modern Age. Unlike my first book, which was a memoir focused on my personal story, this was an academic work, examining the psychological and neurological mechanisms of systematic abuse. The book became required reading in several graduate psychology programs and was cited in court cases involving coercive control. I began consulting with law enforcement agencies, helping them recognize the signs of systematic drugging and psychological manipulation in domestic abuse cases. My relationship with James developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared professional interests rather than the desperate need for validation that had characterized my marriage to Marcus. James understood the long-term effects of psychological trauma and never pressured me to get over my experiences or move faster than felt comfortable. I want you to know, I told him during one of our early dates, that I may never be completely normal. The drugging and manipulation affected my brain chemistry in ways we're still discovering. I have good days and bad days. James smiled. Sarah, normal is overrated. You're one of the strongest, most insightful people I've ever met. Your experiences, as horrible as they were, have given you wisdom that most people will never have. We were married 2 years later, in a small ceremony attended by my support group, Emma, and a few close friends from my new life. Patricia was my maid of honor. Jennifer handled the flowers, and Margaret insisted on paying for the reception. This is what family looks like, Emma said during her toast. Not the family you're born into or married into by accident, but the family you choose and build through love and mutual support. Standing there in my simple white dress, surrounded by women who'd survived the same predator and built new lives from the wreckage, I finally understood what healing looked like. It wasn't forgetting what had happened or pretending the trauma hadn't occurred. It was integrating the experience into a new identity built on strength, wisdom, and authentic relationships. Marcus had tried to erase me, to replace my authentic self with a chemically compliant version that served his needs. Instead, he'd accidentally created someone stronger than I'd ever been before, someone who understood the value of truth, the importance of trusting my own perceptions, and the power of women supporting each other through impossible circumstances. The massage oil had been just the beginning. The real revenge was rebuilding my life so completely that Marcus's attempts to destroy me had instead made me unbreakable. Today, 5 years later, I run a nonprofit organization that provides support and resources for survivors of coercive control. We help women recognize the signs of systematic manipulation, document abuse, and rebuild their lives after escaping psychological prison. Our success rate is remarkable. 93% of the women who complete our program successfully leave their abusive situations and remain free after 2 years. We've helped expose 12 other criminal enterprises similar to Marcus's, leading to the arrest and conviction of 47 abusers across 8 states. The massage oil incident is now taught in law enforcement training programs as an example of how victims can inadvertently expose larger criminal enterprises. What started as simple marital revenge became a case study in recognizing and investigating systematic abuse. But the most important outcome is the life I've built for myself and the women I've helped build theirs. Every woman who escapes coercive control, every victim who learns to trust her own perceptions again, every survivor who rebuilds her identity on her own terms, that's the real victory. Marcus stole 12 years of my life, but he accidentally gave me a mission that's more fulfilling than anything I could have imagined. Every day, I wake up in a house that's truly mine, married to a man who sees and respects my authentic self, working to help other women find their own freedom. The truth really doesn't stay buried forever. Sometimes it just needs a little help rising to the surface. And sometimes, that help comes in the most unexpected forms, like a bottle of massage oil, swapped for superglue by a woman who'd finally had enough of living in a fog. If you're listening to this story and recognizing signs of coercive control in your own life, please know that you're not alone. Trust your instincts, document everything, reach out for help, and remember that the strongest thing you can do is believe in your own perceptions, even when someone else is trying to convince you they're wrong. Your truth matters. Your freedom matters. You matter. And if you need help finding that truth, well, sometimes a little creative chemistry can work wonders. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Like, share, and subscribe for more.